to make a more firm decision for when we can go back 5 days of instruction. And I've said this several times throughout, and I do want to say it again. When we go back 5 days, social distancing, we won't be able to accomplish that in classrooms. We'll feel pretty good about doing it, or at least a good version of it, even on our buses and in our core areas. But in classrooms, our classrooms are staffed the way our staffing should be set up, so that we've got full loads in our classrooms. And the additional time here, I think, gives us additional time to have conversation as a board, and then certainly with the health professionals in town. I realize the inconvenience this puts on parents, certainly. So my goal would be to make a decision by first thing tomorrow morning so that we can properly notify our parents and certainly our educators in the school system of what that looks like. I'd love to be able to say, we said October 12th, let's stick to it no matter what. But I want to do it like we've done this along the way, cautiously. But clearly, for us, the finish line is getting back 5 days a week for in-person instruction. I've had multiple communications with individuals who would like to see that staggered go for a longer period of time. I'm not there yet. I want us to be able to do what this plan asks us to do, is be able to pivot based on where we are as a community and the guidance from local health officials. So kind of to conclude that, I just say that I'd like to be able to make a decision tomorrow morning and communicate it early so that parents can make arrangements should we continue the staggered for another week, and use that week for additional conversation and consultation with local health officials.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Darrell. Board, before I allow any questions or comments to the superintendent, if I'll refresh the board's recollection, in the vote several weeks ago, it gave the superintendent the authority to pivot these timeframes. So this will not be a board vote. This will be a decision by the superintendent. So just keep that in the back of your mind. But thank you for that update, and I'll open the floor for any questions or comments for the superintendent.
Dr. Darrell, you said 5 days of learning, correct?
Referring to in-person instruction.
Has there been any consideration of 4 days of instruction and 1 day for cleaning and sterilizing and disinfecting the building?
Reverend Wilson, that's a good question. Consideration, yes. It's not in our current plan as written, but as we learn more about how we're progressing and what the needs are, not only for the things you mentioned, but also the needs of our teachers, that is something we actually have discussed. In fact, in our leadership meeting, Mr. Lucas, Mr. Wilson, and I discussed something like that. Not yet ready to say that's what we need to do, but to say it's a consideration, yes, sir.
So how soon will we make that decision? Will we be in school and then all of a sudden make that decision? Seeing that we already now use 1 day for cleaning the building, which is Friday?
Yes, sir. I think we would return, and then we would have to entertain that at this table. That would be a decision the board would have to vote on. And I certainly am open to having discussion on that as a board and certainly as a team in this school system.
You know, and I state my position because I have, as you have spoken to us about going to the classrooms, I took the time this week to go to the magnet school, and the principal, Ms. Nishani, showed me what a servant's attitude and heart is. This principal wiped down, she was a janitor, she was a cafeteria worker, she was the CMP director, and I helped her deliver food to her classrooms, each and every last one of them. And I visited classrooms and I saw children who were learning as well as children who were on virtual learning and those who were in person. And it seemed to me that this model was working for those children at the magnet school. And I appreciate what our teachers and our administrators are doing. From the emotional and mental part of those persons who are our instructors and leaders, what type of impact will this have on them psychologically, going back 5 days with no opportunity to have a rest day of cleaning?
I don't know that I can answer that from a psychological perspective, but I can respond to it based on what I am hearing and seeing. The load that our educators, our teachers, all of our educators, drivers, CMP are carrying, it's enormous. The planning that teachers have to do for this model that we've got now for this whole year, whether it's virtual, hybrid, in person, whichever, there's a lot of planning that has to go into it, regardless of which model we're in. So we do have to entertain ways, whether it's through bringing substitutes in when we can, to provide additional planning time for teachers. We've got to look at different ways to provide planning time and time, just time for them to do the work they've got to do, because they are having to plan a good bit, they're having to prepare, and they're learning a lot of new technology at the same time. They're doing it beautifully, but there's a lot there, Reverend Wilson. So I appreciate you recognizing the work that everyone is having to do to pull this off. And I think the other commitment is we've got educators who are really amazing folks, all of them, and they want the best for their students. And that high expectation that's in our mission, they live it. And if they're not meeting that expectation, I think there's a worry that they're letting somebody down. And this is just a year where normal as we know it is not there, but they're doing great work in making it as normal as possible.
And my worry would actually be, what happens emotionally with them. Will we get out of them the high expectation of instruction, opposed to dealing with anxiety after they teach their students and go home to their families with pre-existing conditions, their children who have pre-existing conditions, and then come back the next day to do it all over again. The staggered approach, to me, gives opportunity to decrease anxiety, and it also gives people a choice whether they want to be face-to-face or whether they choose virtual. I think this year is so unprecedented that giving families and teachers a choice is what's very needful in this moment. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Reverend Wilson. Ms. Williams?
Hi, Dr. Derry. I appreciate you giving more time for the teachers and listening to everybody's concerns and seeing what the numbers are going to be, so I really appreciate that right now.
Thank you, Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Dr. May?
Yes, to get an idea of how how our system's doing in comparison to the community, can you give us a 14-day average percentage positive cases in our system versus the community?
The answer is I can, not sitting here right now. I would say that our COVID tracker that is public, you can look at those numbers. I think where you're going, Dr. May, is our numbers compared to the 14-day average that you see for the community. I don't think we're at the 14% mark. Is that where you're going?
That's what I mean, yeah, right.
Yeah. But I'd have to lean on Dr. Sherrod, Dr. Cameron to cite the numbers. We reviewed them today in our staff meeting. Do you guys have any recollection? We certainly can. I think I know where you're going with that, and we certainly can look at that. We reviewed. Good. Would you like me to read those out, Dr. May, so you can have those?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
We have 1.88% of our students are quarantined or isolated at this point. 4.2% of our employees are quarantined or isolated. We have 12 active employee cases, 15 year-to-date employee positives. We have 14 student positives, 28 year-to-date student positives.
That's pretty good, right? When you agree?
Yes, sir.
We're doing pretty well? Okay. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. May. Mr. Hamner? Mr. Lucas?
I just want to say thank you for the consideration, of extending to see where we are. These numbers truly, I think we're looking, we're still a little close. Numbers are rising everywhere, and I do appreciate you considering, extending the week.
Thank you.
Mr. Simmons?
I just appreciate the commitment for doing what we said we're going to do, and that's just remaining visual at every aspect, considering everything is going forward, not just, this whole system that we're dealing with is just, it's like water, free-flowing water. It just continues to move, and sometimes the shoreline may erode in one area, or it may build up in another area. We still have to look at that and make provisions going forward. So continue to be vigilant, continue to watch the numbers, and just expect, the public and everyone else that, things have a tendency to change. And we will have to make those decisions based on the information that's given to us as best as we possibly can for our system and our community. So thank you for that.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons. Any other questions? All right, thank you for that update, Dr. Darian. I assume that the board will be informed of your decision as soon as you make it in the morning.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Item 10B, receive COVID relief funds overview from Mr. J. Duke. Good evening, sir.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members.
Good evening.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just take one moment and echo the sentiments that the board and the superintendent delivered about Mr. Chris Jenks, and if I could add one word, and that's integrity. It's an honor and privilege, Chris, to work with you. We appreciate what you do. I appreciate the opportunity to deliver the coronavirus relief funds budget updates. I want to thank Dr. Pope, Dr. Sherrod, Ed Smith for helping me put this together and for their job tracking these funds at their respective levels. This journey, of course, began back in around March as far as the CARES Act goes, and the CARES Act is kind of the overriding umbrella fund, and that's the biggest pot of money, if you want to call it, and the widest broadcast of uses. And I'll have some slides on the CARES Act, and later down the road, some other funds, we'll call it, developed from this, and that's what I'll kind of go over a little bit tonight. I touched on some terminology the last meeting, I believe it was, and tonight I'll kind of give you some numbers and then some items that we have purchased for use, and you'll see those later in the presentation. Okay, the federal coronavirus relief funds, any of them that I talk about tonight, they'll be used system-wide, and there's no program or division that these funds haven't touched so far. So they're for use for all kids in the system. Still on the right button, Chris. Okay, again, the CARES Act was the original act passed by Congress, and from that, there were 3 more funds that were created later. And so here's a slide that talks about what we call the GEAR, Learning Achievement Gaps Fund, that has about $716,000 in it for use. And the CARES Act there in the middle in the green, the $3,096,000, that was the original, and that's the one we use kind of, again, for a wide array of uses. Later channeled through the governor's office was the coronavirus relief funds, the CRF funds. Those kind of, again, channeled through the governor's office, through the state. And two things are under that heading, the distance learning piece, and then the healthcare supports, which is a nurses-driven fund. And again, we'll look at those in a minute. And I put to the side there, it's interesting, each of these kind of has components of who's writing the rules on them. The Department of Education has the GEAR part of this. The Treasury Department rules are for the CARES Act, and then also the Treasury Department on the CRF, but they've got some FEMA rules in it in addition to the Alabama Department of Finance. So it's been interesting kind of following the rules. The rules have changed, just like this whole situation. So that kind of creates a dynamic on what we can spend it on and when. This document here kind of just shows the dollar amounts available and then the expiration date of the money and the funds. I've got there under the remote learning devices, you see I've got the sold out there. We've got that accounted for and encumbered, so we'll have a slide here later that talks about what that's used on, but we've got that encumbered to the penny on that as far as remote learning devices. Health and wellness, $944,000. The GEAR fund there in the middle, it had 3 components, but you were able to kind of mix and match that and move it around. And you see the 2 blue arrows there. We collapsed that entire fund into learning achievement gaps to the tune of $716,000. And then on the far right there, the CARES Act, again, that was the original one, the big one. That's $3 million. So the CARES Act budget, the $3 million fund that I just mentioned, here's how it's broken down by category. And I tried to use the same categories as I do on the financial statements. Instructional services, instructional support services, operation and maintenance, auxiliary services, general administrative services. There in the green is one you don't ordinarily see. There was a private school allocation of $425,000. And I'll show you how that's broken down 2 slides from now. This slide here is the CARES Act, piggybacks off the previous slide. The green is the budgeted amount. The red is what we have spent and what has been encumbered so far as of September 30th. That's last Wednesday. So we got about $3 million. We've got about $1.1 million left. These funds are good through September 30th of 2022. So I just kind of put a little designation there of how much that would be left over the next 24 months, and that's about $46,000 a month. It sounds like a lot of money, but we've got 11,000 students, 1,500 employees, about 23 different campuses. So we've got to be frugal with this money.
Mr. Duke, is the private school, is that required of us? What?
It is, and that's my next slide, and
Okay.
I'll use that, Chairman Wilson, as a lead-in to the next slide. and I want to put an asterisk by this, and I'll talk about that in just a second, but there was a provision that said that we had to allocate a certain amount of this money based on Title I funds, the formula of how we get Title I money, to American Christian Academy, $200,000, Holy Spirit, $91,000, the Capital School, $41,000, and Tuscaloosa Academy, $91,000. Just a few weeks ago, there was a lawsuit in the federal courts, I'm going to say called a timeout, and they are, have changed how they're doing this based on a lawsuit at the federal level. And so I'm going to go back a screen here. So when the timeout was called, $257,000 had been spent. And you see my note there in blue with the arrow. There's $168,000 still in that fund. And if nothing changes in the federal courts, that's going to revert back to Tuscaloosa City Schools for our use in those other categories. Moving along to, again, the CARES Act, the original one, kind of the broader of any of these. It's kind of like a general category. Here's some of the items that we have bought so far and have on hand. Signs, and I've got some pictures coming up on some of these. Signs, sanitizer, wipes, disinfectant, and mask. Here's a picture of one of the sanitizer stations. And Ed Smith, correct me if I'm wrong, every school has one of these? Okay. Okay. 3? Okay, thank you. So sanitizer stations. Here's a picture of the warehouse, and Ed, that's any number of things there, isn't it? Okay, thank you, Ed. Next slide is one of the many signs. We even have some of these in the central office. We've got a good bit of signage out there reminding people to stay 6 feet apart, social distancing. They've done a great job of broadcasting those out around our campuses. You'll also see in that picture the 6-foot markers on the floor. It's kind of hard to see, but you'll see the little round markers there designating 6 feet. Next slide is also a CARES Act purchase. That's one of the electrostatic sprayers. Those have been getting a lot of use recently. Moving away from the CARES Act and now to the Coronavirus Relief Fund, also known as CRF Health and Wellness Grant. This is a nurses-driven grant, and we've got $944,000 allocated. We have budgeted $292,000, that's the first green bar, to salaries and benefits for nurses. Of that, we've spent $165,000 so far. All the other categories, and we'll look at that in just a minute, are $652,000, and we've spent about $370,000 of that, or encumbered that much.
Mr. Duke?
Yes, sir.
You said we spent those funds on salaries and benefits. Are there any new nurses that we have brought on since the coronavirus has hit our system?
I'm going to let Dr. Sherrod answer that question, but let me just kind of clarify this number a little bit and what composes that. We took nurses that were currently being paid and moved their funding source.
Okay.
So we moved their funding out of the general fund and dropped them in here. And I'm not sure about new nurses. I'm going to let Dr. Sherrod answer that.
Good evening, Board. Excuse me, Reverend Wilson. Currently, we posted for 1 RN and 2 LPNs.
Gotcha.
So we had those interviews this week, and we didn't have that many applicants.
Right.
But yes, they were posted.
Thank you, Dr. Sherrod. And if they were to be hired,
Yes, sir.
Reverend Wilson, we would drop them in this funding source, and this would pay for any new ones.
And so, using the CRF funds, that would kind of kind of give a cushion to the general fund?
That is correct.
Right now, that's the purpose of that? Okay.
And what's interesting about this fund is, it runs out December 15th, so,
Right.
that's not all that far off. So we really, I literally look at it every day to see how that's going and make sure that we allocate enough resources to, take full benefit of this money.
Will we use the money up before that time?
I fully anticipate that we will.
Mr. Duke, can I just interject here for a minute to Ms. Williams' question? Mr. Duke is making us stay on target with that December 15th, but something that is real and in front of us is on the other side, the remote learning devices side that says sold out up there. We've got all that money, a lot of that money tied up in laptops.
Okay.
And these are the same laptops that are not yet in our facilities. So your question resonates loudly for us that if we don't get those laptops before December 15th, we could be in a bad spot. And the reason I say that is because there have been a good number of articles out there in like AL.com and other places where there are concerns about that very same issue. So that is an issue for us that's in front of us. Mr. Duke and our whole team, they're working to find ways to still make sure we use every dollar before December 15th, but we have a lot of it tied up in laptops, the remote learning device amount.
Yes, thank you. That is a real concern on the remote learning devices. Okay, back to the health and wellness grant. Here are some actual items that have been purchased with the health and wellness grant. So in addition to paying some nurses' salaries, here are some tangible items that have been purchased or on hand and being used. Also, with the health and wellness grant, they have, here's a picture, and it's a little hard to see because what it is, it's a clear shield in front of the door. Is that a nurse's station, Dr. Sherrod, or? Yes, sir, that's isolation station. And so that's a clear shield in the doorway, and then also you see the markers there on the floor, the circular blue marker there as well. So that's some of the items that this health and wellness grant have purchased out at our facilities. Another item purchased is the air purifier and circulator. We have those, I think, in all of our campuses. One in every teacher's classroom, one in every lunchroom, and one in every office, I do believe. Nurse's office. So I've covered the CARES Act and the Health and Wellness Grant. The last two, there's a total of 4. The last two I've got on one slide here. And that's the gear, academic support, and instructional resources. And the Coronavirus Relief Fund, digital devices, and internet connectivity fund. The one on the right there, the CRF, that's the one that we've got to find out when those items actually come in. There may be some timing issues with that December 15th deadline. So we'll keep you updated on that. Some of the items bought, these two are somewhat similar, so I've made one slide out of that, but online curriculum, paperback books, remote learning devices, again, and then funding technology and virtual learning specialists. And this is kind of similar to what we were talking about with the nurses, where we repurposed some of those people and started where they ordinarily might be paid out of the general fund or another fund. We're paying them out of the academic support and instructional resources, which is called the GEAR Fund. So, any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Duke?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair. Mr. Duke, I want to kind of piggyback. I want to thank a group of parents who I've had the opportunity to work along with in getting supplies to our different schools and been working really hard, delivering water, and they're now making plans to deliver hygiene items. With some of these funds, wouldn't it be possible to buy water dispensers for all of our schools? So, you know, so that because of the fact that we're not using water fountains, the whole purpose of buying the water was because kids did not have water. And seeing that we have these funds available, and we have, I think, approximately, you said that some hasn't, 1.1 million hasn't been used. Let's say, for instance, those water fountains, water dispensers cost about $111,000. Wouldn't that be appropriate to use those funds to put water dispensers in all of our schools?
Can I ask Ed Smith to come up here? And we, in fact, have been in multiple daily conversations on that topic, but I think Ed can speak more to that.
Good evening, Board. We have been in discussion, and we've already, at this point in time, made a purchase to add water fountains to the dispensing water fountains that can be dispensed, water can be dispensed from. So with that, we're using capital funds to do that. So we're looking at probably a time to come in reference to between 4 to 6 weeks. But we have already started doing that. And that will be retrofitting some dispensers, that will be taking some and adding some based on our outlook when we had our plumbers go around and take a look at it. So that is in the works as we speak.
Also, Mr. Smith, since you're here, looking at that, and this is both of you, for me, I'm thankful that you gave me a listing of this, but I like stuff like a grocery list. Could you give me not only the listing of these, the different instructional services, instructional supports, can you give me an itemized list with dollars and amounts, dollars and cents?
Sure, we have that.
And y'all have that for us? And also, looking at the purchase of the guns, what do you put in those guns?
We put disinfectant in them. As of right now, we're using a disinfectant called BioS.
So how much disinfectant would you have to use? You have to constantly use disinfectant, right?
Yes, sir.
And I'm going to say this. I want us to be, I want you to look at using some UVC lighting that sterilizes and disinfects buildings. You know, when I first got on this board, these children were out here using these robots. And they were showing me how they program these robots, and these robots were making and doing whatever they do. And then to find out from talking to doctors and nurses that there's an opportunity, there are devices that hospitals use that can clean our rooms and sterilize, since we want them in school, that can sterilize and disinfect the classroom in 15 minutes. Wouldn't that be a long-term investment that will save us in the long run? I just want you to take a look at that.
Yes, sir.
Because I believe that if being able to use, if we're looking at dollars and cents, looking at the budget that Mr. Duke presented to the board, in the long run, my concern is making sure that we save rather than having to keep on putting solutions into guns. If we had a robot that can just come in here and sit right here and boosh in 15 minutes, to me, that's some mad science. All right,
Yes, sir. We'll definitely take a look at that.
thank you.
Into that.
Thank you, Ed, and if I might add to the water bottle fillers, at least 2 of our schools already have them, Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary and Northridge Middle School, and I think one more already has them, so there won't be any need for retrofitting at Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary and Northridge Middle. And I think there may be one more that already has those water bottle fillers. So that's good. That's 2 less,
Yes, sir.
possibly 3 less that we'll have to do.
I think it's the last 3 that we did. I think it might have been either Arcadia or Skyland. I think Skyland has them.
I think you're right.
It's Skyland.
So those 3 are good to go now, and so that's 3 less we'll have to do.
And then, Mr. Duke, and the reason I ask for that, because many times, there are many parents, I've been talking to different people who are wanting to give, and some people have raised over $20,000, and they want to give to efforts, but they don't want to give, and they know that money's already out there. So that's why I'm asking you for that itemized list, so that people will feel comfortable about donating and giving. And we want to be able to be transparent to all of our stakeholders in our community. And I appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend
If I
Wilson.
can, Mr. Duke, right there, you know, we had already discussed, I think Mr. Smith and even the construction, is that as we update schools, we were gonna be putting in those fountains. This was before we ended up with COVID-19. It was a process, because I think everybody said, oh, what this kind of fountain is? And so we was in the process of moving to that direction of updating the schools with it as we move along in continued construction. So I want to thank Mr. Smith and them for thinking about it prior to COVID-19, but we were in the process of doing those things. It's just hard to go back and zap them all at one time, you know, under a normal construction situation.
Any other questions for Mr. Duke? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, item number 11, introductions of motions, resolutions for first reading. 11A is receive first reading, new policy, ADA. Dr. Cameron.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
You have the first reading of the Americans with Disabilities Act on the ADA policy. This policy was reviewed by our Policy Review Committee, and it was also written in collaboration with Mr. Ryan and Ms. Smelser. They did a great job on the heavy lifting with the research of this policy. You have this policy, but you also, within this policy, you have the employee request form and the medical certification form as well. And again, this is first reading.
Okay. Any questions for Dr. Cameron? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Item number 12, consent agenda items. There's 12A. Board may have a motion to approve the consent agenda item 12A.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second by Ms. Williams. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That will be approved. Item 13, regular agenda items for final adoption. 13A, approve superintendent's recommendation regarding changes in personnel. Dr. Cameron, good
Yes,
evening again, sir.
Yes, sir. Good evening. You have the superintendent's recommendations regarding changes in personnel. You also have 2 supplemental lists. I will go through each list with you. Starting on page 1, you have 2 retirements, 3 resignations, 1 transfer of certified personnel, 2 new support personnel, 1 transfer of support personnel, 15 part-time extended day tutors. To page 2, you have 4 2020-21 athletic supplements. The first supplemental page, you have 2 resignations. You have 4 part-time extended day tutors, 1 2020-21 athletic supplement, and 2 2020-21 volunteer coaches. And then to the second supplemental list, you have 1 new certified personnel and 2 new support personnel.
Okay, Board, first, are there any set-asides by number only, please, for a separate vote and discussion? Okay, having no set-asides, Board may have a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion, we have a second by Reverend Wilson. Any questions or discussion by number only, please? Having none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Those will be approved. Thank you, sir. 13B, discuss approve Edgenuity contracts. Dr. Pope.
Good evening, Board. This contract is provided an Edgenuity teacher of record for our virtual students for Spanish 1 and 2 for core classes, and also providing instructional services for a career prep class at Northridge High School. The Edgenuity will provide a live teacher for all 3 of those courses, and it's for the remainder, the career prep is for the remainder of this semester, but the other 2 will go into the second semester.
Okay, board may have a motion to approve.
So moved.
A motion, we have a second by Ms. Williams. Questions, discussion for Dr. Pope? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That'll be approved. 13C, discuss approved Millennium Learning Concepts contract. Dr. Pope.
Yes, sir. Board, this is a project that we were working on with aligning our equity practices to our strategic plan, which is being updated and embedded those whatever our findings are. So this contract is really for the project services for covering the comprehensive analysis of our systemic inequities and disparities. That's our first goal. We have 4 goals. The second goal is to determine key leverage policies and structures and practices that can be addressed that either for our inequities or other practices we need to mitigate or core educational domains. Our third one is to support the system-wide development of knowledge and skills for adults to facilitate a culture of ongoing equity practices. And the fourth one is to create a framework of equity for our district. Now, once you approve it, the board will have a work session with the company that will, we have conversations around their work, but also things that you all want to talk about with what you want it to, what the types of goals that you may have as well that'll go along with our goals within the strategic plan. There are 5 steps to the process. The first step of the process is to a discovery phase where we asked them, his group would come in and actually do an audit and discovery pieces like do research about Tuscaloosa City, but also look and see what's happening in our district. And the audit will be basically like interviewing people, but we wanted to spread it more to just internal with our TCS, but in our community as well. So the church affiliates with community organizations, business members around our community, and also all stakeholders that's directly impacting student learning with regards to access for all of our students, and also any type of curriculum that we're putting out. The second one, like I said, the desk audit. The third step is distribute those survey results. We are sending surveys out, but we are doing in-person interviews as well. The fourth step is a site visit, 2 full days at schools, just to see what practices are really happening. And then the fifth step is reporting out, and that's when the deliverables will be given to the board and the key leadership for TCS. The deliverables are school board training, equity report, a presentation given to you all, professional development for all of our leadership team members, and we're trying to spread it out to our teachers as well, the school board and our PLC team, and create the equity policy, an equity plan, and then a community training. This is a total difference than a diversity training. This is truly equity and understanding what the difference between what equity is and what equality is in our district, really going deeper into what our practices are and making sure that we're doing for each and every student.
Okay, board may have a motion to approve.
So moved.
A motion, we have a second by Mr. Lucas. Any questions for Dr. Pope? Call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That'll be approved. Thank you, Dr. Pope.
Thank you.
There's no unfinished business, which leaves us to general announcements. Board, remember, all 3 of the high school football games have been moved from Friday to Thursday night. There's no board work session next Tuesday, the 13th. The next regular board meeting will be October the 20th. I believe we had a birthday last week that we could not celebrate. Mr. Hamner, belated happy birthday. And I believe Miss Williams has a birthday next week, is that right?
No, this Saturday.
This Saturday. All right, so happy birthday to Miss Williams.
So, Mr. Wilson, you have to sing happy birthday. You have to sing happy birthday to
I'm not singing anything, you're the musician, you can sing if you want to.
Guys, the birthday's coming on.
So happy birthday to our board members, and having nothing further, we will stand adjourned.